Last we left off, we had just finished the forge room, having reforged the mallet. Onward through the tower. Next up, the bedroom. This is another transition room. Its combat component? None. Its puzzle component? Traps and secret doors. Its narrative component? The bedroom gives a sense of humanity to the place, while the body decaying between the two secret doors adds a sense of dread, because you know exactly how they came to their end. And the reward? More consumables. The main thing to note here is how the level itself is physically constructed. Notice how almost every room in this place has either 3 or more exits, or just the one. The rooms with a large number of exits give the player a feeling of free exploration rather than being forced down a linear path. But to keep the player from getting lost, and to keep the flow of the dungeon fairly predictable for the designers, almost all of the paths which don't lead back to the main hub room immediately lead to a dead-end room, with just the one exit back the way they came. Alright, after the bedroom, there's a hallway with a trap and more corpses, followed by yet another secret door. Once we burst through that secret door, we're ambushed by another spider, which serves as a nice difference in kind, because the designers know the players just came from a non-combat area. And now the player is in the first mini-hub area. This area has 4 rooms branching off of it, reinforcing that feeling of possibility and exploration, but again, note that all but one of them are going to be dead ends, essentially creating a linear progression as far as the designer's concerned. From this mini-hub, we'll be heading north into the trophy room. Its combat component? None. Its puzzle component? None. Wait, what's this? Do I see a gong? Did we forge a mallet earlier? Might these two go together? Oh my gosh, they do. After ringing the gong, we hear no sound, but we feel a sense of faint vibration. We still don't know what ringing the gong did, setting up another puzzle for the player to think about as they go along. And for the narrative component, we have the treasures the tower's owner has amassed. Next, we have 2 rooms which make up one encounter, the reading room and the sword room. Their combat component? None. Their puzzle component? Well, let's see. You remember those dwarves in the delving room and how each one of them had a short poem that they said? One of them had said, "I am the warrior's fate. I raise him above his brethren. I amplify his deeds. He becomes scornful where once he had respect. He becomes a giant where once he was a man. Yet I lack the proper honor. Raise me up in glory. Through the chronicles of my deeds, pride shall be honored. Through the passing of knowledge, my sword shall display its glory. Then you shall know that I am well pleased." If you examine the sword in the sword room, it says it's called Durlag's Pride. In the reading room are a group of books chronicling Durlag's grand adventures, and if you read through each of them, Durlag's sword starts to glow. His pride has been satisfied. You've solved one of the riddles, tying these rooms back to the overarching quest, and helping to remind the player of that quest in case they'd forgotten, as they're fairly likely to just read all of the books in the other room naturally. The narrative component here is the lore in the books, and the reward component is completing a part of the major quest for this floor. From here, we travel south into a small sitting room. Its combat encounter? In this room is a skeleton warrior. This encounter is interesting for a number of reasons. First, because it only consists of one enemy. An encounter doesn't have to be complex or involve a lot of different units in order for it to be engaging to the player. In fact, in many games that use high-skill combat, a large number of enemies simply muddies the combat scenario. The Dark Souls series is a good example of how less can be more, with most of its encounters involving less than 5 enemies. The second thing that makes this encounter interesting is that it does something you can only rarely get away with as a designer, which is to trick the player into thinking they're fighting something weaker than they are. By this point in the game, the players fought plenty of skeletons, and those guys are no trouble at all. But the skeleton warrior found in this room, though he looks nearly identical, is literally more than 10 times as powerful as the skeletons the player's used to. And this is one of those cases of good designers understanding their design well enough to know when they can bend the standard rules of game design. Because generally, having anything in your game function differently than something it looks identical to is terrible design. Having this be true of a powerful enemy is downright awful, and yet, here the designers get away with it because they're using the very reasons this is awful as part of the encounter design. Even though this fight tricks and confuses the player, the designers get away with it because this is exactly what they're trying to do. And you can tell this because of 2 clues. One is the fact that the monster's entirely alone. Now, trying to parse why you're losing what should be an easy fight amidst a horde of enemies, any one of which could be the cause, that would be frustrating at best and nearly impossible at worst. But when there's only one possible element that could be functioning in a way the player doesn't expect, they get this nice little, aha, clever girl moment where they suddenly realize that this is no ordinary skeleton. Then they'll mouse over the monster and see that it has a different name, and suddenly it all makes sense. Second, if you're coming into this room from the north, there's a trap right before you get into the room, and as by this point they've trained the player to be scanning for traps always, the player will probably lead with their rogue, who's gonna be no match for this particular skeleton by themselves. This combat situation becomes all the more interesting if you've got to start by frantically trying to get your rogue out of combat while getting all your other fighters into it. If the player's coming from the south, it's slightly different as there's no trap. It would be a little harder to fit one into the slime encounter down there, but the designers are probably still anticipating that the player's gonna lead with their rogue, given how much they've trained them to do so. There's not really a puzzle component in this room. The combat was challenge enough. The narrative component is also part of the combat encounter. You've got this nice homey little room, and then this ancient warrior who clearly died there and was cursed to spend eternity in it as one of the restless dead. The main reward component of the room is the magical two-handed sword the skeleton was carrying. Oh, and one last thing about the combat encounter here. The skeleton is highly magic resistant, making this an encounter where non-mage classes, or classes with anti-undead abilities, shine. Which is important, as we already had an encounter that focused on spellcasters. Below the sitting room is a passageway with 2 mustard jellies. It's another corridor fight, so positioning is important, and AoE abilities are of limited use. To add to that, the monsters here are either immune or resistant to many of the damage types in the game, forcing the player to go through all their abilities trying to figure out what works. This corridor doesn't have a puzzle, narrative, or reward component, though there is one trap as you head south. This corridor serves as another mini-hub, allowing the player to head south or east. East will take us back to the central hub room, but we haven't solved all 4 of the riddles the dwarves gave us, so we're not ready to head back there just yet. So join us next time as we head south, solve the remaining riddles, and finally conclude our exploration of the design of the first floor of Durlag's tower.